All right, time to grab a look at what's grabbing headlines here in France. Of that, I'm joined, as always, by our press reviewer, Florence Villamino. Hello. The papers are continuing to react to Sunday's vote in Switzerland, which is cracking down on immigrants.
That's right. It's still a lot of emotion here in France. It's interesting that the French papers are still reacting, even though that vote was on Sunday. Let's take a look at Le Monde today, which looks at how Switzerland's refusal is really shaking up Europe. Europe is still reeling, according to Le Monde, while Switzerland really looks like it's cut in two. Now, let's take a look at the editorial in Le Monde, because it says that there are two lessons to learn from this vote, two ways to look at it. The first one is that what Swiss people were doing here wasn't voting against the European Union as such. They were really voting against European Union citizens, even though Le Monde says that it's kind of hard to see the distinction between the two. And the second lesson, according to Le Monde, you really have to look at who voted in favor of bringing these quotas back. And according to Le Monde, well, what's interesting is the people that voted in favor of bringing the quotas back actually are from areas where there's not that much immigration, but there's a lot of unemployment for Swiss citizens. So according to Le Monde, this is really what's going on here. This is rural Switzerland that's voting in favor of these quotas against the elite in the cities, which voted against bringing these quotas back. So that's what it is. It's a vote against the intellectual elite, against the government, against the system. According to Le Monde, it's basically populism that point the finger at a scapegoat, and according to Le Monde, well, this is proof that populism works. Now, L'Opinion also focuses on the rise of populism in Switzerland and says that this is really weakening the European ideal, and it threatens the rest of Europe as well.
Okay, and Le Figaro is focusing on the timing of this vote, aren't they?
That's right. Le Figaro says that this is a warning for Europe with just a little over 100 days to go before the elections at the European Parliament. And in its editorial, Le Figaro says, look, there is a cause for alarm, and indeed, European leaders have been expressing their outrage, saying that, immigration is actually very good for Switzerland, and accusing Swiss voters of being ungrateful, of being xenophobic. But Le Figaro points out, the fact is, this is Swiss citizens who are voting here, and that's the fact. That's democracy. So you can't really look down on their vote. But what it is proof that this identity question has been ignored for too long in Switzerland.
Right, and that's something that the Libération also looks at, that identity question.
That's right, and Libération says this identity question is actually very alarming. It's a very interesting front page today. On the front page, it talks about the Swiss virus, and you can see the Swiss cross is slightly tilted there, and that might ring a bell because that was actually used in the Charlie Chaplin film The Great Dictator. That was the same cross that mocked the rise of Nazism in Europe. Now, Libération says this vote in Switzerland is bad news. First of all, bad news for the Swiss. 4 years ago, Switzerland expressed anti-Muslim feelings by voting against minarets, and now they're rejecting their closest neighbors with whom they share a language and culture. But this is also bad news for Europe, obviously for economic reasons, but also because of this risk of contagion. These populist politics could very well spread to the rest of Europe. And actually, Libération accuses the UMP, the opposition party here in France, of already being contaminated by this.
Maybe not quite such the neutral country. A lot of papers are also focusing on the economic context this is all happening in.
That's right. Europe rhymes with austerity these days, so perhaps that can explain why Europe isn't so popular. Let's look at Le Parisien, which takes a look at how France is going to have to slash public spending 60 days to find 50 billion euros. Basically, the government has said that in 2 months it's going to present its economic program, and everyone is going to have to tighten their belt, according to Aujourd'hui en France. Now, Les Echos, the business paper, meanwhile, looks at another consequence of austerity of the crisis, and that's the fact that wages aren't going to increase much in 2014. The brakes are on, according to Les Echos. They probably won't increase more than 2.5%. And L'Humanité, the communist paper, takes a look at what all this means for the everyday life of people. Poverty is my living hell. You can read a quote there. That's a quote by a woman named Patricia, 48 years old. She actually just wrote a letter to L'Humanité that they publish today, and she explains how she tries to struggle to survive on just 650 euros a month in unemployment benefits.
All right, and just quickly on a completely different note, there's been an interesting story in Le Figaro about a discovery in England.
That's right, footsteps have been discovered in England, but not just any footsteps. These are the oldest footsteps in the whole, well, not in the history, but at least in the history of Northern Europe. These footsteps are 800,000 years old on the east coast of England, a little place called Habsburg. Now, according to paleontologists, you can tell a lot by these footsteps. You can tell how tall these people were, how much they weighed, even the way they walked. And so, according to these scientists that are quoted in Le Figaro, they're very touched by this discovery, and it's proof that England was actually linked to France by land at that time.
Oh, closer ties than they might like to think. All right, thanks very much for that, Florence Villamino. We're going to take a short break, but stay with us. When we come back, we'll be remembering the Egyptian revolution. 3 years on, and many say the country is sliding back to an autocratic state with power firmly in the hands of the military and Mubarak-era figures making a political comeback. Our correspondents take a look at the situation in our Focus segment.